Alan Dershowitz is suing CNN for defamation for $350 million. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and yes, you heard that right, I was not exaggerating. Alan Dershowitz is suing CNN for defamation for $300 million, $50 million in compensatory damages, and $250 million in punitive damages. When I first read about this, I immediately thought of that episode of The Simpsons, The Day the Violence Died, when Chester Lampwick sued Roger Myers on the basis that he purported to have invented the original Itchy and Scratchy, and he sued for something of an unreasonable amount.
You two screwballs have just strolled in here fresh from the sewer and given me a bunch of bulldink about creating Itchy with no proof at all, and you expect me to give you how much? $800 million.
Alan Dershowitz is suing for Nicholas Sandmann amounts plus $50 million. Nicholas Sandmann being the guy who was doxxed, had his name dragged through the mud, received death threats, is now being harassed at university. Yeah, Alan Dershowitz is suing for that amount plus $50 million. And why? Well, because according to the lawsuit, CNN mischaracterized the argument that Alan Dershowitz made before the Senate in the impeachment hearings against Donald Trump.
I'm not joking.
Now, you may or may not recall that during the impeachment hearings, Alan Dershowitz presented arguments in favor of Donald Trump, that is to say, in opposition to the impeachment, on the basis that there had to be a criminal act in the first place in order for the president to be impeached. Incidentally, I did a ton of vlogs on the subject. I have an entire playlist of the impeachment vlog playlist. I'm going to link it right here if, for whatever the reason, you want to go back and revisit that part of our history. But in the context of the impeachment hearings, Alan Dershowitz basically presented the argument that impeachment requires a crime, and in the absence of a crime, the president cannot be impeached for an act that was itself not a crime or not criminal. And in the context of that argument, Alan Dershowitz argued that even if the act that the president carries out is for the benefit of his own re-election, that it still cannot be an impeachable offense, and the media, because they always report things honestly and accurate, went on to present the argument that Alan Dershowitz basically said that if the president commits a crime, if it is for the purposes of him getting re-elected, it will not be an impeachable offense. That is the level of spin that CNN gave to Alan Dershowitz's argument, and that serves as the basis for Alan Dershowitz's defamation claim against CNN. But let's get into the claim itself. Jury trial demanded. Alan Dershowitz plaintiff versus Cable News Network Inc. defendant. Plaintiff Alan Dershowitz, by and through the undersigned counsel, sues defendant Cable News Network Inc. and states as follows. Jurisdiction and venue. Jurisdiction for this cause of action lies within the court by virtue of 28 U.S.C. 1332. This is an action for defamation, and the parties are diverse in citizenship. The amount of damages sought in this cause of action is $50 million in compensatory damages and $250 million in punitive damages, thus meeting the requirements of 28 U.S.C. 1332A. Venue is proper in the Southern District of Florida for the following reasons. The tort, which is the basis of this lawsuit, was committed in South Florida in addition to all over the world. South Florida has a population of approximately 10 million people, thus making the alleged defamatory statements in this venue significant. Plaintiff is a resident of South Florida and is domiciled in South Florida. CNN does business in South Florida and has registered in Florida as a foreign corporation and voluntarily chose to have its registered agent in Broward County, which is where this court is based. Alright, boring jurisdiction clauses. The cause of action arose in Florida. The amount in dispute exceeds $75,000, so the courts have proper jurisdiction. Now let's get into the substantive allegations. On January 27, 2020, plaintiff represented the President of the United States in the impeachment trial before the United States Senate. On January 29, 2020, in response to a question posed by Senator Ted Cruz, plaintiff delivered a brief response in which he said that the Constitution does not support an impeachment of a president simply because a lawful action taken by a president might have been based in small part or to some degree on a desire to be re-elected, and if the president believes his re-election is in the public interest. This argument was being made in rebuttal to the House manager's claim that a president can be impeached and removed from office if he takes any action whatsoever that is motivated by any percentage or any degree of desire to be re-elected, no matter how minimal. And as far as I recall, the argument was being raised that if the president had in fact engaged in a quid pro quo as relates to an act, the purpose of which was to get him re-elected, that is therefore an impeachable action. And to fully understand Dershowitz's position on the subject, let's just watch the video of what he actually said.
The only thing that would make a quid pro quo unlawful is if the quo were in some way illegal. Now, we talked about motive. There are three possible motives that a political figure can have. One, a motive in the public interest, and the Israel argument would be in the public interest. The second is in his own political interest, and the third, which hasn't been mentioned, would be in his own financial interest, his own pure financial interest, just putting money in the bank. I want to focus on the second one for just one moment. Every public official that I know believes that his election is in the public interest. And mostly you're right. Your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
And getting back to the lawsuit, Alan Dershowitz alleges as follows, and by the way, it's sort of like somewhat cloudy today, so the light is going to radically shift as the clouds pass in front of the sun, which might make things a little weird in the car today. It is clear, therefore, that Professor Dershowitz expressly stated that a president could be impeached and removed from office if what he did was, quote, somehow illegal, end quote, regardless of his motive to be reelected. And because it seems that it is only now that Dershowitz is fully understanding why CNN is called fake news, he goes on to allege as follows. Shortly after that argument was presented before the Senate, CNN then went to work by assembling panels for programming throughout the day in which the hosts shared only this part of Professor Dershowitz's argument. Quote, every public official that I know believes that his election is in the public interest, and mostly you are right, your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment. Now that argument seems pretty clear, especially when coupled with Alan Dershowitz's fundamental argument that the impeachment act itself needed to be a crime, but apparently it wasn't clear enough for CNN. Following the airing of that clip over and over again, the hosts, together with their panel guests, including CNN employees and paid commentators, exploded into a one-sided and false narrative that Professor Dershowitz believes and argued that as long as the president believes his re-election is in the public interest, that he could do anything at all, including illegal acts, and be immune from impeachment. Sorry, the train just went by. The very notion of that was preposterous and foolish on its face, and that was the point. To falsely paint Professor Dershowitz as a constitutional scholar and intellectual who had lost his mind. With that branding, Professor Dershowitz's sound and meritorious argument would then be drowned under a sea of repeated lies. With that portion of Professor Dershowitz's words played without his words that preceded that sentence, it was an easy sell to CNN's viewers that the respected Alan Dershowitz believed that the President of the United States could commit illegal acts as long as he thought it would help his re-election and that his re-election was in the public interest, even though it was the opposite of what he said. The only way to fool its viewers into believing that Professor Dershowitz actually said and meant what CNN hosts and panel guests knew was the exact opposite of what he said was to deliberately omit, quote, the only thing that would make a quid pro quo unlawful is that the quo were somehow illegal, end quote. So CNN is taking something that Alan Dershowitz actually said, albeit out of context, in order to spin it into a straw man argument of something that Alan Dershowitz didn't say. Now the question is, how on earth could this possibly be defamation? Well, Alan Dershowitz does his best to argue for that in the following paragraph. Such conduct is in direct violation of law and outside First Amendment protection. The Supreme Court made this clear in Masson versus New York Magazine, Inc., where the court held that a media organization can be held liable for damages when it engages in conduct that changes the meaning of what a public figure has actually said. Well, this might seem promising on its face until we get into what Masson actually said. While Masson involved the use of quotation marks to falsely attribute words to Jeffrey Masson, the law that the case created is broad and unequivocally denies First Amendment protections to a media organization that takes deliberate and malicious steps to change the meaning of what a public figure has said. That is exactly what CNN did when it knowingly omitted the portion of Professor Dershowitz's words that preceded the clip it played time and time again. Call me skeptical, and I really don't mean to defend CNN here, but I'm not convinced that not playing the entire clip is the legal equivalent of falsely putting something in quotation marks that the person didn't actually say. And just to open a parenthesis, I am taking for granted that all of you are sufficiently familiar with the criteria for defamation. I've done a ton of vlogs on defamation. I'll link a defamation playlist right here. Suffice to say that the defamation consists of publishing a false statement that causes damage to the individual, and if the individual is a public figure, the statement has to have been published with actual malice. Which brings us into the question of what damages Alan Dershowitz actually suffered. The aftermath of that barrage of defamatory programming was its ripple effect throughout the entire media industry. From other news outlets to talk show hosts and social media trends, CNN's deliberately false narrative spread like a disease, with each other forum replaying solely that portion of the tape and mimicking CNN's malignant conclusion that Alan Dershowitz believes that a president could commit crimes and escape impeachment as long as he subjectively believes it is in the nation's interest that he be re-elected. And again, at the risk of defending CNN, which I really don't have any interest in doing, I'm not sure that there can be defamation through concealment, but maybe I'm wrong. Regardless, let's read a few of those comments that Alan Dershowitz is referring to. Having worked on about a dozen campaigns, there is always the sense that, boy, if we win, it's better for the country. But that doesn't give you the license to commit crimes or to do things that are unethical. Joe Lockhart, 7:11 p.m., January 29, 2020. The president's defense team, Dershowitz, seems to be redefining the powers of the president, redefining them towards infinity. John Berman, 6:17 a.m., January 30th, 2020. I did not go to Harvard Law, but I did go to the University of Texas School of Law, where I studied criminal law and constitutional law, but never dreamed a legendary legal mind would set them both ablaze on the Senate floor. The Dershowitz doctrine would make presidents immune from every criminal act, so long as they could plausibly claim they did it to boost their re-election effort. Paul Begala on CNN.com, January 29, 2020 at 9:11 p.m.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Professor Dershowitz was one of the most revered and celebrated legal minds of the past half-century. His reputation relating to his expertise in criminal and constitutional matters was one that lawyers would only dream about attaining in their lifetimes. However, Professor Dershowitz appears to have made one mistake. He chose to defend the President of the United States and defend the U.S. Constitution at a moment in time where CNN has decided that doing so is not permitted. For this, CNN set out to punish him and destroy his credibility and reputation, and unfortunately succeeded. Due to the overwhelming vastness of its broadcasts, CNN caused substantial damage to Professor Dershowitz by irreparably harming his reputation. Now, as far as I am concerned, the allegations as relates to the alleged damages are not just weak and unsubstantiated, they are borderline circular. He sustained damages because they published it, and therefore caused him damages. Other than the statements themselves, I don't see any actual allegations of real damages, and as far as I'm concerned, reading those statements, it makes me think less of CNN, not of Alan Dershowitz. They only confirm what I think pretty much everyone already knows, is that CNN is
Fake news.
and nothing but spin. The lawsuit itself doesn't actually allege that anyone actually believed the spin that CNN was putting on Alan Dershowitz's position. The defamatory statements made by each commentator were made in the course and scope of their employment relationship and or agency relationship with CNN, thus making CNN vicariously liable for any and all damages resulting from each commentator's tortious conduct, in addition to CNN being directly liable for the publication of false statements and for its failure to exercise due care to prevent the publication or utterance of such statements. And we actually learned about the concept of vicarious liability in a vlog I did breaking down an episode of Suits. If you haven't seen that, I'll link it right here. It's an old and cringy vlog, but still nonetheless worth a watch. But basically, the idea of vicarious liability is that an employer can be held liable for the conduct or wrongdoings of the employees. CNN's decision to omit the part of plaintiff's argument in which he prefaced his upcoming remarks with the fact that it did not apply to illegal acts was done intentionally and deliberately with knowledge and malice to facilitate its ability to falsely claim that plaintiff said the opposite of what he actually said. As a direct and proximate result of CNN's defamatory actions, plaintiff has suffered and continues to suffer damage, including but not limited to damages to his reputation, embarrassment, pain, humiliation, mental anguish, and has sustained past and future loss of earnings. CNN knew that its statements were false at the time the statements were made or had serious doubts about their truth, and nonetheless made and or published the statements with an intent to indulge ill will, hostility, and an intent to harm, thus giving rise to the right to recover punitive damages in order to deter CNN from engaging in this conduct in the future and hopefully restore integrity to both CNN and the media as a whole. Restore integrity to CNN?
Oh, what was I laughing at now?
Restore integrity to CNN? Wherefore, plaintiff demands A. Judgment against the defendant in the amount of $50 million as compensatory damages, $250 million as punitive damages, all taxable litigation costs, pre-judgment interest and post-judgment interest, a trial by jury. Okay, and my prediction is that this lawsuit is going about as far as a worm on hot pavement.
I like that.
I am making my prediction now. It is a bold prediction. This lawsuit is not even going to survive a motion to dismiss. On its face, this lawsuit would seem to create the precedent of defamation through omission, and as much as I don't really like CNN, I don't think that's going to fly. We will see where it goes. We'll see if my prediction comes true, and if you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Subscribestar, YouTube membership, Patreon. We've got merch. Politics ruins everything, but more important than all of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah.